Welcome to Cycling Demystified and a special series of podcasts on the 10 essential pillars of bike fitting. We had such a good response from a recent webinar we did on this subject and so many questions that we thought we would dive deeper into the 10 pillars and bring you a podcast episode for each of them. We've dedicated an entire episode to each of the essential pillars so that you can take the exact same proven methods we use in our bike fit sessions and apply them to your own bike fit. Hopefully this will be particularly useful for those riders who can't make it over to our studio in London. We'll be releasing 2 episodes each week, one on Monday and one on Thursday. Follow along in sequence and you'll be able to build your bike fit up in the same order as we do in our studio sessions. As always, if you have any questions off the back of this series, get in touch. We want to hear from you and we'll help you find that amazing bike fit you've been looking for. So grab a seat, cup of tea and tune in so that we can share the knowledge we've accrued over thousands and thousands of bike fits. Once you've got your cleat position and saddle height right, you can move on to experimenting with your cockpit. There's lots of variables to explore, so Matt and Wei delve into the different options to test, measurements to be aware of, bust some bike fit myths, and give you the best way to figure out your cockpit position. Providing, of course, you don't have an integrated cockpit.
Welcome back, dear listeners. We are talking about cockpit position today in our Bike Fit podcast. So, what should we talk about? We're going to talk about cockpit reach or position, overall position.
So I think overall position, like where should your handlebars be? Common misconceptions about how to achieve that, and some things we can do at home to try and improve our handlebar position on our own bikes, assuming that you've got adjustability.
Assuming you have adjustability, that is a very good point. And actually, one very good reason.
I've thrown a spanner right in the works there, haven't I?
No. Well, I was going to say, I was wondering whether or not we see more people coming in for bike fits now since the advent of integrated cockpits, because there is less adjustability.
I think that would be a fair comment.
Do you reckon? I'd love to see some data on it. I feel like it's...
Anecdotally, yeah. You're about to drop 10 Gs on a bike with only 15 mil of stack adjustment, no adjustment to the stem. Probably want to get it right.
Yeah, but that's not why people buy bikes.
That's true.
They just buy it because it looks cool and they think it's going to make them go fast.
So before you do drop a ton of money on a fully integrated cockpit that has very little adjustment, you probably want to make sure that your cockpit's in a good place if you're basing your new purchase off something that you already ride. Yes,
unfortunately we are the voice of reason and practicality. I know it's not sexy.
We're beacons of fashion and style.
Yeah. But we are here to give you the practical advice so that you can avoid the pitfalls of buying a bike and then realizing that it doesn't really work for you. But let's delve into a little bit more detail onto cockpits and why it's important to get your cockpit position correct, what you can do about it, how you can test it, and maybe some of the common misconceptions we get through the Bike Fit Studio that people have kind of read online, as it were.
So I'm going to go into the what it is. What is cockpit position? Because there's a lot that can influence this.
Yes.
At its basic level, it is how tall and how far away your handlebars, your hands are from the bottom bracket. At its most basic. And I say handlebars and hands because the two are very different things. So it's, trying to find out what we call handlebar stack and reach is. So stack being how tall it is on the y-axis, x being how long it is on the x-axis, and then figuring out once you've got that in a good place, where your hands need to go. So grip, stack and reach, or hood, X, Y. Same kind of principle. How tall your hoods are, how far away they are from the center of the bottom bracket.
Yeah.
And your choice of cockpit can influence this greatly. But that is essentially what it is. How far away your hands need to be from your feet.
Yeah. So I think there's 5 dimensions that will influence or you can influence, that will change your cockpit position. One is the amount of spaces that you run underneath your stem. So you can move the kind of cockpit up and down. 2 is the stem length. So stem is the connection between your steerer tube on the bike and your handlebars. So that length, the longer the stem, then the further away your handlebars go. Handlebar width. So that's number 3. I was going to say handlebar reach as well. So handlebars,
very often overlooked.
Yeah, very much overlooked. Handlebars have a reach element to them, so how far they extend away from the clamping part of the handlebar. So handlebars essentially have a length as well as a drop kind of measurement. And we're talking about drop style handlebars here. But even mountain bike handlebars have a reach element to them, usually a back sweep element, so they'll bend kind of backwards, and so actually your hands will end up further back behind you. But yeah, this will have an influence on how far your hands are reaching forward, and then also the type of shifter hood that you're installing on the handlebar. So new Shimano Di2 shifters are actually probably like 10, 12 mil longer than the old ones. And so these will have an influence on kind of how far away your cockpit feels, how far away the controls feel, so on. Did I miss one out?
Stem angle.
Yeah. So in order to get or influence your handlebar height, you can also change. You can either change the amount of spaces that you use under the stem, but you can also flip the stem angle. And even some handlebars will have like a rise in them as well. So there's lots and lots of different ways which you can recreate certain positions. There's lots of different bits of equipment out there. And so every equipment choice you make has an influence on your fit.
But what are we trying to create at its essence in terms of a good handlebar position with all of these dimensions and influences? What are people looking for?
Yeah, so both in terms of a road bike and a mountain bike or any bike position, you want to have your hands firmly over the controls of the bike. So the controls are there to enable you to brake, to change gear, and also that's where your bike is designed to be steered from. So really important that you are as in control of your bike as possible. Like, you don't even have to think about where you place your hands in order to brake or change gear. And actually it's amazing how often we see people making that compromise of like riding in a bike position, but they're constantly scared of, not being able to reach the brakes, especially going downhill. I can't reach the brakes. And this has a big impact on their riding. So essentially, number one, I'd say, is to remain in control of your bike. Number two is just, you might be able to reach the controls, but are you comfortable kind of reaching your controls? And if you're comfortable, can you maintain that position? If you're not comfortable, you usually can't maintain that position. Anything else there?
I think that's basically the two pillars, isn't it? It's like comfort and control.
Yeah.
Are you as comfortable as you need to be and in control as you want to be?
Yeah.
For the type of riding that you're going to do.
Yeah. And I know, like, if you look at the pro cyclists, they always come up with some crazy handlebar positions and things like that. But usually that's because they're trying to influence other things like aerodynamics, and they're willing to compromise the other aspects of their cockpit.
Usually safety.
Usually safety, yeah. I mean, so much so that the UCI's come back now and put a ban on the amount of flare and kind of angle you can place your hoods, things like that, because, yeah, it's just not safe. So stay in control, guys, unless you're racing the Tour de France and you need every millisecond of marginal gain.
Which you are not.
Then, yeah, put safety first. Told you we were boring. Yeah.
You're only as fast as you can stop.
Yeah, absolutely. So should we talk a bit about signs that you're not in the right position or your cockpit could be out of position?
Let's go into that.
Yeah, because it follows along from what we were just talking about. So what would we see if, what common things do we see if someone's not in control?
I'm going to start with a myth.
A myth?
I'm going to start with a myth. A higher cockpit and a shorter reach is more comfortable.
You just destroyed the entire endurance bike category there.
And happily so. So shorter and taller cockpits.
Yeah.
Good for some, not for others.
Yes, absolutely. So if you listen to our saddle height episode, then one of the key takeaways is to experiment with your position, explore, and figure out what is best for you. Human beings come in lots of different shapes and sizes and proportions, and particularly kind of leg length to torso length proportions. And so you can have someone who's the same height as the next person next to them.
Well, we're pretty much the similar height, aren't we?
Yeah, so we're similar heights, but we're very different in our proportional makeup.
Wildly different bike positions.
Yeah. I would not want to ride your bike, Matt.
I don't think I could ride your bike. I think I'd be able to reach the pedals.
Yeah. So what's different about your bike? You've got like a 120 mil stem and 100 mil reach handlebars.
Yeah, on a very long frame.
On a very long frame. But your seat height isn't as tall as mine. But I've got I've got more seat height showing, and a slightly shorter frame, shorter reach bars, and shorter stem. Yeah, similar-ish kind of like cockpit height though. Yeah.
But I think the basic premise is, finding out what works for you, isn't it? Like, just because your mate is the same height as you, it doesn't mean that they're going to need the same cockpit position. So if we start with cockpit too high, as I've kind of gone into that first, what might you be feeling if your handlebars are too high?
Very apt. We had exactly this yesterday, didn't we?
We did.
So, yeah, cockpits can be, it's just as bad to have a cockpit that's too high as too low. Because your body will want to adopt a certain torso angle. Like when you're riding a bike, you sit on the saddle, but you need to lean forward. And you need to lean forward in order to generate power or force. If you think about starting a running race and getting down into the sprinter's blocks, like why do they exist? It's because you can get into a low, powerful position to spring out from the blocks from. And so you kind of compress your body to spring out from the blocks. And essentially this is kind of what we're doing on the bike. We're kind of compressing our body a little bit, leaning forward, getting some of the bigger muscle groups like your glutes kind of ready to spring into action. So we want to lean forward a certain amount, but if our handlebars are a little bit too high, then they'll stop that body from kind of leaning forward to the amount that feels good for you. And in between your torso and the handlebars, your arms, shoulders, And so your arms and shoulders will have to kind of accommodate that somehow. It may bend a little bit or not. And depending on how far out your handlebars are, then you might actually start to feel a bit of discomfort in your hands or your shoulders as the bar as your body essentially wants to compress or be a little bit lower, but it can't get there without kind of pushing your hands or your shoulders or arms into the cockpit. So you actually might feel more pressure, more pain, more discomfort if your handlebars are too high. You might find your arms are locked out because they're trying to kind of hold themselves away. At the same time, you might be able to bend your arms and bend your elbows a lot to try and get yourself into the right torso position, but then you just feel really cramped up. So if you feel like there's not enough space or there's a lot of pressure against your hands and arms, then that might be a sign that your cockpit is too high or too short.
And both are just as bad as each other.
Yeah. And how do we find out what the best position is for us?
Start making changes in the opposite direction.
Yeah. So again, you don't know what you don't know. And when we start a bike fit, we don't know if somebody is sat too high or too low or too far away or too short until we start making changes, until we start changing the position and seeing how their body reacts. We can make assumptions, for sure, and this is what a lot of people do when they see other riders out. They just make an assumption based on their own knowledge. But you really don't know until you start changing things around. Yeah. So how would we tell if handlebars were, say, too far away?
So one of the telltale signs of handlebars too far away is your hand position relative to the controls.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we see riders who are riding bikes that are too long, where they can't hinge forward far enough, whereby they can put their hands right up into the grips on a drop bar bike, or if they're kind of sort of almost kind of doing a plank, like a push-up on like a flat bar bike, trying to reach the kind of the handlebars. So yeah, if you're kind of riding, your default riding position is kind of on the bend of the handlebar on a drop bar bike, and you're feeling a lot of pressure through your hands, then potentially your handlebars or your grips are too far away. Your handlebar reach is too long. There might be a lot of other things going on, but that's a telltale sign. Another compensation is people scooting forward on the saddle and trying to cover distance that way. If you're slamming the saddle all the way forward to try and make up for a reach that is too great, then that's a whole world of consequence that you're going to have to deal with elsewhere on the bike. So yeah, they're probably the most common ones that we'll see. And an interesting sign as well is looking at wear on your bar tape.
Yeah, that's a really good
If your bar tape is wearing in certain places, then chances are that's your default position, and you might want to make some changes to try and get yourself further into the shifter hoods, closer to the brakes and the gears.
Yeah, so just have a look, guys. Have a look at your handlebar tape, see where it's wearing. If there's some regular kind of wear marks, usually at the bend, then it might be a sign that your handlebar's a little too far away. I just caveat that one circumstance, and this is an interesting one for you to try at home if you've got a home trainer and you've got your bike set up and you're tinkering around with your bike position. A little bit like saddle height. When you get to set your saddle height, you've got to try putting a bit more pressure through the pedals, and you've got to see if that kind of saddle height still feels good when you're applying more pressure on the saddle, as on the pedals. So the same applies to your handlebar position. So what happens when you start pedaling harder? What happens to your hand position? Does it change? Does the amount of pressure you feel through your hands change? And essentially what happens is that as you push more power through the pedals, your legs do more work to lift your body and hold your body up in space. You're putting less pressure on the saddle. And so this can also influence how much weight you're feeling on your hands, and therefore how far you can actually reach. You may find that alleviating some of that kind of pressure allows you to actually reach a little bit further. So some racers might find that they feel best when they're going full gas. They're going threshold and above. And this is where you want your bike to feel really, really good. And so you will optimize your bike position for that situation. And so you want the reach to accommodate your hand position when you're going really, really fast. But when you take the foot off the gas and you soft pedal, you'll find that suddenly a lot of weight comes back into the hands because your legs aren't doing that work anymore, back into the saddle. And so you might find that you can't sustain that position on top of the hoods. And maybe that's fine, because you want to optimize your bike for that kind of racing position. And maybe if you're doing crit races, then you're only racing for an hour or so. So maybe that's a fair compromise. But if you're not racing and you want to just use your bike for the weekend ride, the club run, do a little bit of bike packing, all the rest of it, you need to stay in control of your controls when you're going at a leisurely kind of pace, I would say. So
you essentially need to test it outside at the intensity of where you want the bike to feel best. In summary.
Yeah. That would be best. I mean, you can do a little bit indoors too.
Yeah, the indoor trainer is useful in terms of like experimenting and kind of like playing around. But then, bikes are designed to be ridden outside, so you need to test it outside.
Yeah, but this is where like formulas and algorithms just fall flat, because there is no choice. There is just the one kind of determinant. And I think what people need to do is to kind of use the algorithms and apps or whatever, or bike fits that they go to as a starting point, and then go away and experiment with a bit more knowledge and, this reference point of, okay, this is where maybe my bike position should feel good. What happens if I push it a little bit further? What happens if I bring it back a little bit?
So talked about too long. Talks about too high, talks about too short. That leaves too low.
Too low. Too wide as well.
Too wide as well, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, wide is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I had a lad in the other day who was riding, he was over 6 foot, and he was riding 44 width centimetre bars.
Because that's what come on big bikes.
That's what comes on big bikes. Like, everyone thinks, oh, big guys, bigger they are, the wider they get. But if anyone's looked at a cyclist, that doesn't
They tend to just go up rather than out.
And actually, he was having all kinds of issues and sitting really wonky on the bike. And we got him on 38 bars, and everything just straightened out. It was like, oh, amazing. That was the thing that made the most influence. So wide bars, just too wide is just as bad as too narrow as well. So too narrow, you'll find that you can't control your bike. A bit more pressure on the hands, can't breathe as well, because your shoulders are collapsed inwards, shoulders rolled inwards.
Yeah, the pressure tends to go towards the outside, like the heel of your palm.
Yeah.
Like on the outside of it. If you're too narrow, that's a good giveaway that I'm currently feeling on my bike. Personal experience.
But you're so aero, mate.
I'm as aero as a barn door.
But this is it. This is again where choices come into it. There's definitely a certain range in which you can operate. You can ride those narrow bars, and maybe it will make you a little bit more aerodynamic and therefore faster in certain situations. But what is the cost of that? Where the compromises? It compromises comfort. Then, if that becomes a priority, then go to a wider bar and test it and see what happens. Like, does it feel more comfortable?
So how do we go about figuring out what is the right handlebar position?
apart from like testing a load of stuff, if you're kind of a home mechanic,
Does
then,
putting your elbow at the end of the saddle and your hand up to the bar work?
back onto the myths.
It's a loaded
myths.
question.
Yeah. So the old Italian myth of putting your elbow on the tip of your saddle, and then I think your stem, your handlebar position was supposed to be 3 fingers or 2 fingers width in front of your extended hand. If you place your elbow against your tip of the saddle in a horizontal fashion towards your stem, and then you added 2 or 3 fingers, then that would be your handlebar position. I mean,
amazing.
Like, where on earth did that even come from? Why would that even work?
The pub, that's where that came from.
Some bloke just said, yeah, that's how you... Like, if life was that easy, mate, like, we'd all be like pro riders by now. But yeah.
So don't do that. What's the other favourite?
The other favourite, it's when you're sitting on the saddle and you got your hands on your hoods and you look down, there's your handlebar, so where the stem meets the handlebar clamp. Does that cover your vision of the front hub? Like,
another banger.
Like, what happens if you've got a really long neck? Like,
You're never going to do that. Slack head tube angle.
Yeah. Well, like, going back to saddles, like, what happens if you've got an Arione saddle, which is super long, versus a short nose saddle? And it's going to throw everything out, isn't it?
So don't do that.
Yeah. So don't listen to these old Italian myths. Like, these are just kind of myths from when people just didn't understand bike fitting. The main thing you need to do is to go out and test some stuff. One thing at a time, test it objectively, change some things, just see how it goes. This is science. This is what science is. Science is having a hypothesis and then testing it and seeing if it's replicable.
Trying to disprove it.
Yeah. Science is not just like lasers and numbers. Science is a method. And so you need to apply science to your bike fitting. That might be difficult because there's a lot of things to change, like stem lengths. I mean, stems, if you don't have an integrated cockpit, then you can buy lots of different stems and change them out. You can buy different handlebars, change them out, and so on, or borrow them off your mate, talk to your club, talk to other people who ride, try stuff out. If you can't do that, then what do they need to do?
Unfortunately, you need to come see us.
Yeah, you need to come get a bike fit, because this is where we can test things. We have all the saddles. We have 150 different saddles. We have stem changes, handlebar width changes, and this is what we do.
Shifters, all kinds of stuff.
So yeah, it is the fastest way to test and to understand your bike fit. But absolutely, I recognise people want to test stuff themselves. So I'm sure there'll be people out there with drawers of stems which they've tested out and found out that they didn't really work. So,
but as a few guiding principles, would we say we want to be in control of where our hands go.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be in control of our bike.
Yep.
And have a kind of essentially just like a placement of your hands on your handlebars rather than using it as a stability point. You want to be able to extend through your spine so that you're breathing, hinging through your hips. You can feel your core, you can feel your glutes working, you can feel your feet. And if you think about driving a car, you can make a very heavy object move with relatively little input. That's kind of the sensation you want to feel on the front end of your bike. You do not want to be using the handlebars as a stability point. It's a contact point from which you can keep it rubber side down and decide which direction you want to turn. And if you are not feeling those things, try something different.
Just try something different, guys.
See if it's better or worse. If it's worse, you've not lost anything. You've gained knowledge.
Absolutely.
If it's better, wicked. It's better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know you're going in the right direction.
Good stuff. All right. So let us know how you get along. Love to know if you've got any questions. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Matt. Ciao.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell all your friends about me. At Cycling Demystified on Instagram. Tell everyone. And leave us a review on your podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whatever. That would help us out a lot. Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Way or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram at FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram at frequencycycleworks. Until next time.